What do you say, everybody? Welcome to Monday Night Quarterback here on the Bama Insider YouTube channel, presented by Westgate Luxury Condominiums, right there next to Bryant-Denny Stadium. And we're going to talk about the Crimson Tide tonight with Jimmy Stein and Joseph Hastings. Clint Lamb on assignment, but he'll be back next week. But great to have all you guys here. Make sure you like and subscribe. Hit the thumbs up as we hang out with you and talk Alabama. A lot of stuff to get into. Hit the bell so you know when we're live. And look, the best way to do this is share. Tell your friends about it. The thumbs up's a Roll Tide. And thank you guys in the comment section for being here as well. Chris Daughtry behind the scenes as we get ready to go. Jimmy, awesome to see you, man. Lots to talk about in our world.
Never boring in Alabama sports world for sure. And this is a great time of the year because spring practice, men's basketball. Over the past 3 days, I've seen Alabama play baseball. I've seen Alabama play softball. I'm going to go to the gymnastics Friday. It's a great time of the year, actually.
Yeah, look at you doing the whole spectrum of sports. And we'll start with football. Alabama players in the combine. It's not surprising that Jahmyr Gibbs has been great. You got, Brian Branch, who'd probably like to have better results. Will Anderson's there. All these guys are there, and it's setting up for the draft. I don't think you can do too good or too bad, though, to be honest with you. I mean, we've seen this over the course of time, but your thoughts on the combine?
Sure. I think most of Alabama's guys helped themselves. I don't think anyone torpedoed anything. I mean, I think most of the results were really good. I don't think the combine means quite as much to Alabama guys as it does some other places for a few reasons. Number one, they sort of know what they're getting. Alabama's extremely well scouted during the year, and you play in the best conference in college football. So like for Brian Branch and Will Anderson and Jordan Battle, I mean, there's 3 years of great tape to study, and the answers are on that tape more so than they are in Indianapolis. Indianapolis just sort of verifies some things. Now, some guys did really well, though. Jahmyr Gibbs, his times were outstanding. He was actually even a little heavier than I thought he would be, which is good for him. It seemed to me, I would have guessed. Now, I'm pretty good at this, carnival weight guessing stuff. I thought Gibbs played around 185, this past season, but he measured in at 199, which I think is going to help him. And then he goes out and runs a sub 4.4, which we know is going to help him. So Gibbs in particular was great, but I think really all the guys from To'o, I thought really helped himself with his times. Jordan Battle and even DeMarco Hellams had 4.5 times, which is really good for pure safeties in the NFL. And Bryce, he didn't work out, but you know what? I don't think anything changed. There were some interesting quarterback shows at the combine with Anthony Richardson from Florida, Will Levis from Kentucky, and C.J. Stroud, who threw the ball great during the passing exhibition. But I don't believe any of those guys displaced Bryce as QB1 in this draft. So in that sense, it was a good week for Bryce. Hey, he's 5'10" and 1/8, and you know what? That shouldn't have shocked anyone at all. And I think I think the NFL had a pretty good idea that Bryce was in the 5'10" range. So I don't think that hurt him because it wasn't a surprise. He came in to the combines at 5'10" and QB1, and I think he's leaving the combine that way. So a good week. It's fun to be talking football and the draft this time of the year. Again, our guys were in great shape. They'd clearly trained for this event. And most of the guys did really well. It's hard to point. Maybe Branch, I wouldn't say disappointing. I have seen some scuttlebutt from NFL scouts that they weren't knocked out by what Brian Branch did this weekend. But I would also note that Brian Branch chose or was picked to work out with the cornerbacks, which are basically the best athletes in the combine. And Brian Branch is probably going to be a safety in the NFL, at least a nickel corner, and probably should have been with the safety group, where he'd have been one of the more athletic kids, in the safety group. But instead he worked out with the corners. And maybe for that reason, people thought his numbers might have been a little off. But I'm still convinced that Brian Branch will be a first-round pick. I just think he might be a later first-round pick. But that, guys, Mick, that's typical for safeties in the NFL draft is maybe one goes in the first round. It's never too high. Some years 2, some years 3. But most of the time, safeties don't get, their due in the NFL draft. So Branch being drafted in the 20s shouldn't shock anyone. That's typically where, your best safety or second safety goes.
Talking Alabama football on Monday Night Quarterback right here on the Bama Insider YouTube channel with Jimmy Stein and Mick Gillespie. Bryce Young came in at 5'10" and a half, and what was it, like 205 pounds? And there's a lot of talk about who's going to be that first quarterback taking. I can't imagine that some GM would actually not take Bryce Young and take a Will Levis or an Anthony Richardson, who, kind of has caught a lot of momentum in this. But having seen Bryce Young play, he is 5'10", but he plays like he's 6 foot.
That's right. I'm with you, Mick. I believe Bryce will be the first quarterback taken. I think someone's going to trade up to get him, most likely the Colts. That's what I've been saying from early on, and I still believe that. I think the Texans could also move up from 2 to 1 and draft Bryce. And I wouldn't even rule out the Panthers or Falcons doing that. But I think most likely the Colts, possibly the Texans. Look, Bryce is a short guy. Look, any Alabama fan that gets real defensive about it and says all this talk about Bryce's height, that's a nothing burger. That's not true at all. If that was true, there'd be multiple 5'10" quarterbacks that weighed right at 200 pounds throughout the history of the NFL. But the fact of the matter is, Bryce would be the lightest quarterback ever selected in the history of the draft in the first round. So it is a big deal. He's a bit of a unicorn. The question is, despite Bryce's lack of size, should he go number 1? And I think they're just going to run through the tape and watch 2 years of Bryce tearing apart SEC defenses and realize that, the majority of players this upcoming draft will be taken from the SEC. Bryce in the NFL is going to play against what amounts to his SEC peers. And he's already been highly successful, in the SEC, playing against the same guys he's going to be playing against on Sundays. So I think he's going to be the number 1 pick. But anytime I hear an expert on TV wanting to put the brakes on over his size, I get it. I certainly get it. And with Anthony Richardson, I think there will be some discussion, Mick, because of his enormous upside due to his incredible size and athletic skill. There will be some push from some quarters for Richardson to go very, very high, if not number 1. But gosh, if you are an NFL GM and you trade up to the number 1 pick to take a guy that only completed 54% of his passes this past year over Bryce Young, and it doesn't work out, then you might as well call, 2 men in a truck, right now. I mean, you are gambling with your career. And it's kind of crazy to say, hey, isn't Bryce the gamble at his size? Yeah, Bryce is a gamble at his size. But Bryce was a much, much better college quarterback than Anthony Richardson was. And hey, I'll say this as a great number to have. Missouri starting quarterback, this guy named Brady Cook. A lot of Alabama fans aren't familiar with him because Alabama didn't play Missouri. But Brady Cook was Missouri's starting quarterback. And as a passer, even though he started all year, he's questionable enough to where Missouri took a couple of guys out of the portal because they would like for a new quarterback to beat Brady Cook out because he wasn't very good. Anthony Richardson's QBR rating was lower than Brady Cook's. So I'm just saying, I see the physical ability. I see the upside. I'm excited about the upside. I also believe Richardson has a chance to be an extremely good NFL quarterback. But betting on him over Bryce Young feels foolhardy, really. Like, I can't believe a GM would bet his career on that. And we'll see if it happens.
Yeah, I'd be shocked if he turns out to be a good quarterback because so much of what you do in the NFL relies on accuracy and because the windows get a lot smaller. So I've kind of been surprised about about both of those guys, Levis and Richardson, being, kind of touted up there. But I get the size part of it too, because of what's happened with Tua's career. But the thing that Bryce Young has done that Tua just can't seem to figure out is just get rid of the football. Don't take the hits. Bryce has been so much smarter when it comes to just not trying to do extra and avoid the contact. And and that's, why he has been relatively healthy. He did get injured last year, but we'll find out. I think that's the big question, because, he could be the first Alabama player taken first in the draft in the history of Alabama football.
Isn't that incredible? With Alabama's long storied history, with all that Alabama's achieved in the Saban era, the fact that Bryce would be the first number one pick in the history of the program is unbelievable. But there's no one more deserving. There's no one more talented. I believe Bryce is the best quarterback that's ever played football at Alabama ever. Maybe the best offensive player I've ever seen play football at Alabama. Certainly in that argument. I think he's going to be a really good NFL player, because a lot of the things that made Bryce great at Alabama will continue to make him great in the NFL. His decision-making, his accuracy. I love how, as a quarterback guy, see guys that are real gifted with their feet. What I look for when I'm looking at high school quarterbacks, I watch a lot of high school quarterback tape. What I'm looking for, Mick, is a guy who's a great athlete, but he uses his athleticism to become a dangerous passer. And by that, I mean he's a plus athlete. He's got great feet, and he's a good athlete. He could get out and run around and make plays with his legs, but he uses his legs to buy himself more time to use his arm to make the play. Bryce is outstanding in that regard. He is a plus athlete. He could make his living just running around with the ball because he's really good in the open field. He just doesn't do it because he's always looking to make the play with his arm. That's a real quarterback. That's a guy who's going to have success in the NFL. And frankly, Anthony Richardson could learn something from Bryce in that regard. Richardson's still a little quick, in my estimation, to just pull it down and make a running play. Now, Richardson's 244 pounds. He's going to inflict more punishment than he's going to get. Bryce is built much differently, so that explains a lot of that. But even in the NFL, Richardson needs to be a passer first, and that's why I would put the brakes on if I was an NFL GM about taking him too high. But I do get that why he's going to go really high, and that's that with his athleticism and size and strength, he has a chance to be exceptional, not just an NFL quarterback. Aiden O'Connell from Purdue, he's going to get drafted in the 5th or 6th round. He's an NFL quarterback. But you're not going to take him too high because he's just a guy, right? I'm not trying to be critical. I'm just saying he's a 5th or 6th round pick and is probably a lifelong backup. He's just a guy. Well, Anthony Richardson, if things worked out for him, he could be one of the greats. So someone's going to gamble, but Bryce is just less of a gamble. Bryce is proven. He's a proven winner. He's more of a proven passer, and he has outstanding acumen for the position in terms of understanding coverages. And he's a student of the game, and he just checks all those boxes. Hey, Bryce showed up at Alabama a star, Mick. He showed up a star. He was a star the second he got here. Mm-hmm. And that's why he's going to be a really good NFL player.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. He's done nothing but answer all the hype and over deliver on expectations, and that's hard to do. The only problem that he had was that they didn't win a championship with him at quarterback, and I kind of put some of that on the creativity of the offense. I think we're going to see Jahmyr Gibbs go to the NFL and be a better NFL player than he was in college, and I think that part of that was Alabama's inability to help him on the offensive game planning aspect. But we'll find out. Maybe I'm wrong. That's what my gut feeling is. Great to see all you guys in the comments section, as always. And thank you. And throw those comments in there, whether you're hanging out with us for the first time or you're a longtime watcher and subscriber to Bama Insider. And don't forget about BamaInsider.com. Jimmy's on the message board all the time. So if you want to ask him or you want to have this same discussion, easy to do, $29.99 at BamaInsider.com. Andrew Bone, Joseph Hastings, who's coming up next, talk recruiting. Jimmy and Clint Lamb are on there constantly. We're getting bigger and better. We got a lot of surprises between now and next football season on the site. Make sure that you're a part of it, BamaInsider.com. And thanks again to all you guys for being here tonight and hanging out with us. All right, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about this current Alabama team, guys that aren't in the combine, guys that are ready to represent Alabama. 2 weeks till spring practice starts. So let's get into some positions here. Running backs and the offensive line, they go hand in hand.
They do. And I had a little piece today on the Bama Insider board and stories where I wrote up a little thing on two offensive linemen, one new guy, Elijah Pritchett, and one returning guy, Seth McLaughlin, and also talked about Roydell Williams. So that got me sort of in the mood to discuss offensive line and running backs all day. But here's what's interesting about the offensive line. Alabama returns 4 guys who have started games at the college level on the offensive line. 4. J.C. Latham, who started all last season. Tyler Booker, who played all last season, but he actually only started, I think, once or twice. Seth McLaughlin, who started about 11 times, and Darian Dalcourt, who started around 20 times in his career. But those 4 guys are returning starters. They're returning guys who have started games. I think particularly early, Mick, you'd be crazy not to expect those 4 guys will be in starting roles. I know Dalcourt and McLaughlin have both played center. One of them's going to have to move to guard. I'm guessing Dalcourt. That's just a guess on my part. I think those 4 guys will be starters early on. And by that, I mean spring practice, probably all through spring and A-Day, those 4, because everyone else is inexperienced or freshmen. Now, I do think that maybe 1 or 2 of those guys could end up losing their jobs once the games start in the fall and as younger players gain more experience. I wouldn't rule that out. But right now, in terms of building blocks, I think Seth McLaughlin at center is a strong building block because he's started around 11 games. He's bigger. Notice he's now listed at over 300 pounds on the roster, which and size was a thing for him early on, but now listed at 301 pounds. Experienced, smart. Center's an interesting position. It's cerebral. It's usually blue collar. There's usually a guy starting at center at every big program in the country who was a 3-star or a no-star. It's typical, I think, for that position. Not so much a tackle, but at center. I think Seth has the makings to be an all SEC type center. And I think he's just an excellent building block. Is he a superstar? Is he a future first-round pick? None of that's true, most likely. But he can be a collegiate all-star player now that he has plenty of experience and some size. So I think that's a good piece to build around. Booker and Latham, who are returning starters, they're stars. They're big. They're Evan Neal. They're Jonah Williams. They're Cam Robinson. We've had a few of these guys before, and now I think in those 2 guys, that's what we got. We got future NFL stars. They've both played. They both had some experience, and this will be the season, Mick, where Alabama makes a lot of its hay running behind the J.C. Lathams and the Tyler Bookers. They'll be the dudes up front that get some push. But I've mentioned 4 guys. There has to be a minimum of 5, as we know what the rules are. I think that 5th guy is to be Elijah Pritchett. That's a guess. That's a projection. He hasn't done enough in the games to be emphatic about that prediction, but that's what I believe will happen. We'll see. We'll get a lot of those answers this spring. I think Pritchett has ability like J.C. Latham, like Tyler Booker. He just doesn't have any experience, but he can gain experience quickly with the start against Middle Tennessee in September. I believe he'll be the 5th guy along with those 4 experienced guys. And then once the season starts, young guys like maybe TJ Ferguson at guard or Caden Proctor, a true freshman, Wilcom Formby, a true freshman, maybe they'll push those starters and maybe push someone out of the starting lineup like a Dalcourt. Maybe they'll be too good to keep off the field once they know the scheme and know the playbook. But the way I look at Alabama's offensive line, Mick, it's not deep. You're really dependent on guys who haven't played much, like an Elijah Pritchett, like a Tyler Booker. You're very dependent on those guys being good right away. If they're not, you could have a real problem because of Alabama's lack of experience. Again, only 4 guys have started games. No one else has even really played in games, or at least not significantly. So it's shallow. It's not deep. It's about finding those 5 guys. But if they do, they're going to be blocking for a really good running back group. I profiled Roydell Williams today. In my mind, Mick, Roydell is Alabama's 3rd running back this season, behind Jace McClellan, behind Jam Miller, who I think is going to make a huge run up the depth chart this spring. And Roydell, I think he's capable of being a starting running back in this league, capable. And he proved last year, Mick, he was probably Alabama's best running back on 3rd down because he's such a good blocker back there. They'd sometimes have to take Gibbs out and take Jace out on 3rd down because they'd struggle a little bit picking up the blitz. Roydell was just stoning blitzers throughout the season. I think he was Alabama's best 3rd down back and Alabama's best short yardage back. So there will be a role for Roydell, and he'll be a part of things. What's exciting is here's a guy as good as Roydell, but he probably is the 3rd back behind Jace and Jam. So it's a good running back crew that's behind the offensive line, which on the one hand has some question marks, and on the other hand has a higher ceiling than the past 2 offensive lines at Alabama.
Yeah, good point. And before we talk a little basketball and we get into recruiting with Joseph, I got to throw this out here too. It's been leaked out. The 3 teams that would be the permanent opponent for Alabama. And part of it was Nick Saban mentioned it. And honestly, I don't blame him for saying what he said about Alabama having to play Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU every year. And then you look at the rest of the teams, and every other team has that soft opponent. Like I thought it would be Auburn, Tennessee, and Mississippi State. I figured that LSU would be the one that they took out of that. And, Coach Brian Kelly's like, hey, we want to play the best. Yeah, well, you're playing Ole Miss every year. And you know what? Right. Believe it or not, like Ole Miss might be good now, but they're not good consistently. They're not a historically good program. That's a win pretty much every year for your team. And Alabama doesn't have that. I know they had that long winning streak against Tennessee, but those days are over. Tennessee's got all those resources. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, me and Coach Saban were really upset about it. And hey, if I'm agreeing with Coach Saban, I'm probably in really good company in terms of who knows what's best for our program. I do think the scheduling is really complicated, but it can be made easy when you think of it like this, Mick. Is that there's 16 teams now. You could say that roughly 5 of the up to maybe 10 of the teams are halves and about 6 are have-nots. Now that's all relative because it's the SEC, right? We're not the MAC, we're not the WAC. I mean, it's the SEC. Everybody's pretty good, but I think there's a way to do it, Mick, where every team in the league plays 2 halves and 1 have-not. And when you break down like the great work from Ross Dellinger, who's done a lot of great work from Sports Illustrated on this, when you break down what Ross's best guess or what his best information is, it appears that everybody in the league pretty much is playing 2 halves and 1 have-not, except a couple of teams. Tennessee's playing 2 have-nots.
Yeah.
Nobody else gets to do that.
No.
Nobody else gets to do that.
What a joke.
For some reason, they have 2 have-nots.
Right.
And Alabama's got 3 halves.
I know.
And it's inequitable. And when I've read some comments, and I think people are sort of missing this point when they say, yeah, but Alabama plays Auburn, Tennessee, and LSU every year right now. Why is everybody upset? We already play those teams. Well, that's because it was a format. That's under the old format. The whole format for scheduling is changing. Under the old format, it treated Alabama really fairly. We played 1 team from the East every year. Everybody else in the West plays a whole West schedule. It treats everybody in the West as treated the same. You play 1 team from the East. Yeah, Alabama was playing a traditional strong opponent, but you know who else was? Auburn played Georgia. LSU played Florida.
Yep.
Didn't really make much of a difference to Alabama that Ole Miss got Vanderbilt every year because let's be honest, we're not really competing with Ole Miss to win the SEC every single season. But we were competing with LSU and Auburn, and they had a tough opponent in the East too. The old format was fair to everyone, including Alabama. This new format, it can be fair to everyone, but in the initial draft that I saw, it was not fair at all to Alabama was fair to everyone else. And for whatever reason, Tennessee had the easiest schedule out there. It's like as if this whole plan must have come from Josh Heupel's desk.
I felt the same way. And look, it matters. It absolutely matters. Okay.
Yes.
If Georgia would have played the schedule that Alabama played last year, they would not have went undefeated. And I don't even know if they would have made the college football playoff. If you had switched Alabama with Georgia and those schedules. And so that's why in the NFL, they work so hard to make the schedule equity, right? They do that because it matters, and if you lose a couple of games, it matters. And so there was a year 2010, Jimmy, where the SEC did the same thing to Alabama, except what they did was they let every single opponent in the conference have a week off before they played Alabama. Do you remember that?
Right. I do. That was
and guess what happened?
Inequitable. It wasn't
then
fair.
They lost some games because of it. So if you're Nick Saban, if you're Alabama, you better stand up and say, hey, this isn't going to work. When you look, not only the fact that Alabama's playing these three really tough opponents, and like you said, not having the one that's not in that group. No one else is even close to that. And one of our arch rivals and a team that's going to be around for a long time, Tennessee, is playing a soft schedule. When you put South Carolina and Vanderbilt in there every single year for them, it just does not match up to what we're looking at in Alabama. So I'm sure that there's going to be a discussion. And if I'm Nick Saban in Alabama, I'm not doing this. I'm going to put my foot down.
And that's why I think he came out. I mean, Nick Saban was the first to blurt out, hey, this is their plan and this is what they're doing to us, because Nick Saban was extremely unhappy with it. That's why he, quote, leaked it out himself, because he's trying to get ahead of it. He's trying to say, hey, this is what they're talking about doing to us, and we don't want to do it. And yet the schedule is everything, Mick. And like you say, I agree with you that had Georgia played Alabama's schedule, no slight to Georgia. It's not like they didn't deserve their national title. Of course they did. But had Georgia played Tennessee on the road, had Georgia played LSU on the road, they might lose both of those games, if not one of them. If you're playing a tough schedule, you're going to play some of them on the road. That's where seasons go to die. The great college football historian Bino Cook, famous for saying, hey, Germany lost World War II because they played Russia on the road. That's you play somebody tough in their place. It's not going to go. It's not going to go good all the time. Yeah. And Alabama's toughest games last year were all on the road, and it was just going to be extremely difficult to overcome that. It would have been very difficult for Georgia to overcome it. And quickly, I'll say this. It's a little bit more of a hypothetical. Michigan and TCU both made the playoff, rightfully so. Ohio State made the playoff with a loss. But let's just say Michigan, who was undefeated. I'm not saying they didn't deserve being in the playoff. Of course they did. Undefeated Big Ten champ. Of course they deserved it. TCU, maybe a different story, but I'll say this and ask, would Michigan and TCU have beaten Tennessee at Tennessee? Would they have beaten LSU in Baton Rouge? Probably not. Probably not. So the schedule, it doesn't just matter, Mick. The schedule means everything.
Yeah, look, I'll put it like this. I stole this from Ben Ingram, but he's exactly right. If TCU would have played Alabama's schedule, if they would have been in the SEC, they would have been playing in the Cheez-It Bowl.
Yeah.
And would have been happy about it. Look,
I don't disagree.
Come on. You go play those five teams back to back, the way that schedule rolled out, and then have to play the other teams at home. That's why this really matters. So hopefully when it's all said and done, that things will be, like you said, it'll be equal throughout the entire conference.
These conferences matter. The Big 12, the TCU fans will get upset, Mick, about me and you saying that and agreeing that TCU was a 7-5, 8-4 football team in the SEC, and TCU fans be, what are you talking about? It's crazy. Oh, the Big 12 is unquestionably the best basketball conference this year. Unquestionably, the Big 12 is best. Oklahoma is nearly in last place in the Big 12, and they beat Alabama, the SEC conference champ. So I'm sure the Big 12 fans understand when I say, hey, you know what? If Alabama was in the Big 12, they might not have won that league. They couldn't even beat nearly last place Oklahoma. Imagine playing, 9 road games in that league, in basketball. So I'm sure they understand that concept, that the SEC champ or a good SEC team would struggle to get to 9-9 in that conference this year. If they get that, then they should get why TCU would struggle to win SEC road football games.
Let's talk a little bit of basketball before we get back into football recruiting with Joseph Hastings hanging out. Monday Night Quarterback right here on the Bama Insider YouTube channel. Guys, like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up as you hang out with Jimmy Stein and me tonight here. All right, today it was announced that the SEC Player of the Year, the SEC Freshman of the Year is Brandon Miller. No surprise there. He leads Alabama's team after winning the SEC into the tournament. How about JQ? Javon Quinterly, the co-sixth man of the year. I think that's a really prestigious award because in this day and age, guys don't like to be the sixth man, but he's done a great job of it yet again. And then Bediako on the all-defensive team, and Sears on the team as well. What is he, like second team, Sears, maybe?
Second team. Yeah, he made second team, and Jaden Bradley and Noah Clowney joined Miller on the all-freshman team.
How about that?
So really all five of Alabama's starters were named or given some level of honor from the SEC coach today. All five starters plus Quinterly off the bench. So that more than explains Alabama's success. It's always about dudes. Yeah, coaching matters. Yes. The bounce of the ball, officials' calls, all that stuff matters. But what really matters in the end are dudes. And dudes win things like all SEC and Player of the Year and Freshman of the Year and Sixth Man of the Year and Bediako on the all-defensive team. This is a team full of dudes. It's not the Brandon Miller show. We talk about all the time here, Mick, on Monday Night Quarterback. The reason this Alabama team is SEC champion is in part because of Brandon Miller and how good he is, but mostly because it's not the Brandon Miller show every night.
Right.
The team is full of good players and full of guys who step up on nights that Brandon is double teamed and triple teamed or Brandon doesn't have it. Those are nights that JQ can win the game or Sears can win the game or Noah Clowney wins the game or Bediako blocks shots. And it's a great team and teams win championships. Again, anybody out there that thinks Alabama's just lucky to have Brandon Miller and Alabama's a champion because it's the Brandon Miller show, they didn't watch Alabama's 31 regular season games. It was not the Brandon Miller show night after night after night. It was a team effort.
Yep. Well said, my friend. Alabama first round bye in the tournament in Nashville, trying to win some games and maybe lock up the number one overall seed in the tournament after that loss to Texas A&M. Just staying ahead of Houston would be big because then Alabama could get the South Regional, which would be in Birmingham, and I'm sure they would love that instead of having to go somewhere else and play when they can stay relatively close. All right, before we get out of here, Jimmy, again, tell everyone what you got going on at BamaInsider.com.
Yeah, this week, less than 2 weeks to go to spring practice, and I've been doing my roster ranking, releasing 3 a day. I ranked the entire spring football roster, who's the best player on the team, all the way down to player number 60. We started at 60, more fun that way. We're down to in the mid-20s now, low 20s. So it's all stars. It's all players that the fans know, and where I've ranked them, and it's all building up to the drama of who I've said is the number one player or the best player on this Alabama team, and we'll see who I decided on when we get down to number one.
Awesome. Well, check it out. And again, that's at BamaInsider.com. Jimmy Stein, the dean. And you were just educated about Alabama football and basketball. Jimmy, thank you for talking, and roll tide, my friend.
Appreciate it, Mick. Looking forward to next week already.
Yeah, me too. We didn't have enough time tonight. We just did 34 minutes, and we could still keep going, but we can't because people want to hear some recruiting news.
I want to hear Hastings. I'm getting off of here and I'm turning on the show.
Thank you. And it's easy to do on YouTube. Bama Insider. Like, subscribe, give the thumbs up so you know that we're live. And you, when you hit the bell, anytime we have a show, pops up on your device so that you know. Thank you so much, Jimmy. Guys, our show is presented by Westgate Luxury Condominiums, as always. All right, let's bring them on. Without any further ado, covering Alabama recruiting from coast to coast, there he is, Joseph Hastings. What's up, man?
Mick, I'm doing excellent. I hope that my facial expression isn't one of too much surprise because I was just looking through my Twitter timeline and I saw that an 11-year-old, class of 2030, got offered by FAMU. I I was kind of shocked by that. It's a really interesting time in recruiting right now.
That's 1 year older than my son. So that means that he must be in 6th grade because my son's in 5th grade.
I think so too. I lost the tweet. I was scrolling through it and I was just shocked by it. Had a graphic made and everything. Congrats to that young man. But wow, that's something nowadays, to get an offer in as a 6th grader. Incredible.
Wow. That's amazing. And I'm just trying to get my son to brush his teeth every day, Well, look, man, a lot going on in the world of recruiting. Always good to see you. What's your takeaways from Saturday's Junior Day?
Yeah, so it was a jam-packed Junior Day, and we talked about it before because Alabama's already had 2 Junior Days before on January 14th and January 28th, and we said this one was probably going to be a little bit bigger. Part of the reason why is because there was a month-long dead period from pretty much the end of January throughout the whole course of February. So we knew that prospects were going to want to get on campus. Alabama was going to want to get these guys in person, see them, extend offers. That's exactly what we saw. Saw a handful of offers dished out, including one to 2025 quarterback Antoine Hill, the number 7 quarterback in the class of 2025. Alabama's now offered a few 2025 quarterbacks. You all will know KJ Lacey out of Saraland High School, teammates with Alabama commitment Ryan Williams. So Antoine Hill received an offer. Amari Jefferson, who's a Tennessee Volunteers baseball commitment, also received one, as well as a few others, including a 2026 quarterback. So the offers were extended. We knew that was going to happen. But Alabama had a really nice mix of recruits on campus. You had the in-state guys and Jeremiah Beeman, Jordan Ross, a couple of top 100 players in the 2024 class, a few others as well. Anquan Fagans out of Thompson High School, big-time 2025 DB that everyone should be paying attention to, honestly. His brother's on Alabama's football team, has high interest in the Crimson Tide early on. But they also had some out-of-state recruits make their way out to Tuscaloosa as well. Jordan Lockhart, who was committed to Ole Miss while he took that visit to Alabama, decommitted a day later. It's not related to Bama in any way based off what we were told, but he's somebody that we talked to, spoke with, said he had a great time, got to meet Robert Bala, new inside linebackers coach there for Alabama. Also got to meet a couple of others on the staff, Kevin Steele. So he enjoyed himself. Dylan Stewart, number 1 overall player on 3. He made his way out to Alabama as well. Dominic McKinley, a 5-star defensive lineman out of Lafayette, Louisiana, who Alabama offered a couple months ago. He visited, said it was a little bit of a long trip, longer than expected, but that he enjoyed it. He enjoyed how kind of in-depth it was and everything he got to see. And Alabama's coaches, the culture, everything stands out to him. So, yeah, look, we can talk for another hour and a half about this Junior Day and everything else we have to talk about recruiting-wise, but it seemed like Alabama kind of knocked it out the park with the recruits that they hosted on campus.
Hanging out with Joseph Hastings here on Monday Night Quarterback. Show's brought to you by Westgate Luxury Condominiums right there next to Bryant-Denny Stadium. Units go from 1 to 5 bedrooms, 900 to 3,000 square feet. The Skygate Club, that's where we're at after every single Alabama football game. It's like the zone on the roof of the building right next door. And you are in the vicinity of everything happening, the Strip, the Quad, Bryant-Denny. If you're there for basketball, you're not far from Coleman, right there near campus, all that stuff as well. And don't forget BamaInsider.com on 3. Now that we're part of on 3, $29.99 until August 31st. All right. I guess I got a couple questions. What did guys think about Kevin Steele and Robert Bala and Tommy Rees, the new coaches? It sounds like they did a good job of making a first impression.
Yeah, so Robert Bala actually earned the title, the moniker "football nerd" from Ty Anthony Smith. He's a linebacker out of Texas. He just said that he wanted to talk football and just kept on talking with him about it. Ty was in the cafeteria with Robert after one of the meetings that they had, and they just kept on talking. And that's the kind of coach that he likes. He wants somebody who's as enthusiastic about football as he is. We also spoke with Fred Clark out of Mississippi. And he said that he likes the way that Bala broke down plays and how he coaches. Lockhart, who I mentioned before, said that, Bala is a great guy, really liked him. Kind of going over to Tommy Rees, new offensive coordinator there for Alabama. He was actually the one who extended the offer to Antoine Hill, the quarterback I previously mentioned. And they got to kind of go over some things, how Tommy, structures his offenses at Notre Dame and now at Alabama. They kind of went over a concept that was run at Notre Dame before, and Anton was kind of breaking things down with him, how that how the play went, what the first read should be, things like that. And what Tommy told Antoine that they want in their quarterbacks is this, Mick, accuracy. They want strong decision making, and they want playmaking, ability to escape out the pocket and make plays off script. So those were kind of some of the main things that Coach Reese emphasized to Antoine during their time together. We also heard from a couple of others about Tommy Reese too. Jamie French, he's one of the top 2025 prospects in the country. He raved about Coach Reese. He's known about him since Notre Dame. So the reviews from Coach Reese and Coach Balla were really well. As for Coach Steele, we didn't really get to hear too much from defensive players about him. He was still kind of familiarizing himself with some of those guys. But Jeremiah Beeman, who I mentioned before, he said that he had a good time with Coach Steele. He said that Coach Steele believes that he fits their defensive scheme, kind of went over what they would like to do and how they would like to utilize Beeman. Trayshawn Griffin out of Centralville, Alabama, also said that he talked with Coach Steele, said that he feels that he fits Alabama's defensive coordinator position the best, and spoke highly of him. So yeah, that was honestly, and I think we talked about it before, Meg, that was one of the big things about this junior day visit is what would the recruits say about these new assistant coaches and the new coordinators, and seems like it was a pretty good experience there. We initially expected one of those coaches to be Austin Armstrong, obviously short-lived tenure there at Alabama. We had heard a little bit about him, but it was great to hear about Coach Balla and what the linebackers had to say about him.
Yeah, good stuff. And, we're talking about 2 weeks away from the start of spring football, right? Recruiting, a big part of that. Guys are going to be able to kind of get a look at what these new coaches are going to bring to the table, offensive style, defensive style, and so much. But it's all relative because Nick Saban's the head coach, and we've seen this happen time and time again. And the guys come in, and then you're going to see the draft come, and there's going to be a bunch of Alabama players that are going to become millionaires that night if they're not already. So it's exciting. It's been a process, and that's what these guys are all vying to be a part of. And another opportunity for you to see some of these potential Alabama players was the Under Armour camp in Orlando Sunday.
Yes.
Sunday. What was it like there?
Yeah, so I had gone to the one in Atlanta the weekend before, and I had to make it out to the one in Orlando too. It was only an hour and a half drive for me. I'm in Gainesville right now. So, got to speak with some recruits there. One of them, Jonathan Daniels, 5-star offensive lineman, #1 offensive tackle in the 2024 class per On3. Alabama hasn't offered him yet, but they're in touch with him right now about getting him up on campus for a visit. He visited multiple times last year, says he's open to another one, which is pretty encouraging because, when you talk to some of these guys and, they have big time offers and, they've already visited a school before, they're going to wait until they get the offer to go back up again. But it seems like he's open to visiting even without that offer from Bama still. We got to talk with Chauncey Bowens, running back committed to the Florida Gators. We had an interesting conversation with him because he said that he speaks with Robert Gillespie and Travaris Robinson, and that he's in touch with Alabama multiple times per week. He's hearing, from them a lot. They're trying to get him on campus as well for a visit, and he's not ruling out an official to the school. And we had some more intel as well from Under Armour Orlando, especially on the top 10 safety in the 2024 class, Zaquan Patterson, and a few others, Florida State commit to. On BamaInsider.com. So I highly encourage you all to check that out. Definitely a lot of great intel from that event and that experience. But, no Alabama commits, no primetime targets, some of the familiar names that we've talked about in the 2024 class, but some pretty good information in there.
Awesome, man. Well, this is great stuff. Excited about everything going on in the world of Alabama. And we appreciate all you guys for hanging out with us tonight. The comment section, you guys have been doing it again, and we appreciate that as well. So Roll Tide to all of you guys, and thank you so much for the comment. And being a part of our show. Like and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. That's a way of saying Roll Tide and your appreciation for hanging with us tonight, and hit the bell so you know when we go live. And don't forget, you can get all these nuggets every single day at BamaInsider.com. $29.99. You get Joseph, you get Andrew Bone talking recruiting, keeping you updated on the site until August 31st, 2023, or $9.99 a month. Now that we're part of On3, we got a lot of really cool things going on. We're part of, I think, an industry leader and an organization that is changing the face of team coverage. And that's not bragging. I'm just telling you, just keep an eye on everything that's going on, and you guys are going to want to be a part of it. And look, it's a small investment at $29.99 to see all the cool things that are going on, where we're at now, where we're going, and where we're going to end up. So we want you to be a part of that as well. Anything else, Joseph, before we close up shop tonight?
No, just stick around at BamaInsider.com for all the upcoming spring practice updates. Clint just ran a great story on the height and weight changes on the Alabama roster. So I thought that was pretty interesting. You all should check it out. Bone and I are going to continue to have recruiting coverage, plenty of interviews from Junior Day, plenty of interviews from the last 2 Under Armour camps. I still have interviews from Under Armour Atlanta I haven't run yet. So very happy to roll those out over the next couple of weeks. So be sure to sign up if you haven't already, and stay tuned for what we've got coming out.
Awesome. And don't forget, the show's brought to you by Westgate Luxury Condominiums right there next to Bryant-Denny Stadium. Find out more information at westgateal.com, whether you're in the market for real estate, you're coming to school, you have a student that'll be at Alabama soon, and you want to make sure that they have a place, or you're just visiting. You can rent those units as well. But you're not going to be disappointed. It's luxury at its best right there in the heart of campus, really. Well, not quite campus, but right next to Bryant-Denny. So you could throw a stone and hit the football stadium. That's all you need to know. Chris Daughtry, another great job behind the scenes. Thanks to the dean himself, Mr. Jimmy Stein, for jumping on. Clint Lamb will be on again next week. And for Joseph Hastings, the guy that puts all of this together, Mr. Kyle Henderson, and our entire On3 crew, I'm Mick Gillespie. Hey, guys, roll tide. We'll talk to you next Monday.
Roll Tide. Thank you.